Hi there, welcome to class. Before we get too far into the process of doing assignments and homework and such things, I want to talk about what the requirements are and what the potential and desired outcomes are for this class. This is not just a basic writing class. This is a class in which we are going to use academic style, academic approaches to research, academic approaches to writing, but we're going to combine that with some ability to create a narrative, to move from one idea to the next, to essentially tell a story. So I want to walk through, first of all, the outcomes that College of Eastern Idaho, and for this class, because it's a class required by all college students in the state of Idaho, the state of Idaho has created a list of outcomes that it wants students to come away from this class having learned. And so by outcomes, it just simply means, what do you want to take away from this class? And so I'm going to go through those here with you briefly. This is just an overall introduction. This is in the syllabus, so you should already be familiar with it. But I find that it's sometimes helpful to remind students that there are specific outcomes for each course you take here at CEI. So here's a quick run through of what those outcomes are for this class. First of all, how to conduct research. And there's a right way and then a whole bunch of wrong ways to do research. And what we want to do is get to a point where the research you are finding is credible and in some cases scholarly. And I have a whole lesson on how to identify this. But we want to learn the next level on how to do research. Now, one of the challenges is sometimes if you're just using a basic search engine, you are arriving at some academic sources that won't let you in. And so there's a lesson on how to start with CEI's online library, which will get you access to 95% of the available research on anything you want. So make sure that you watch that video on how to go to the next level on doing research. So we're going to focus on how do we find answers to really important questions, answers that go beyond just supposition or, heaven help us, conspiracy theories, into research and data-based information. Now, is research and data-based information always 100% correct? No. What we're trying to do here, by learning how to do this, is to reduce the opportunity for error by applying certain standards. And part of that process is to learn to engage with information in a critical way. You're identifying what makes sense, what doesn't, where did it come from, is it appropriate to use for your purposes for the assignment. We're going to have one essay on that's a persuasive essay, but there are other elements of persuasion and similar approaches in some of the other assignments as well. So we're going to learn a little bit about Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, and his approach to persuasion, and you're going to learn to apply those. The most challenging part of this class for most students is learning and following the rules for APA, that's American Psychological Association, and MLA, Modern Language Association, academic style. And a lot of students look at it and say, well, why is it so specific? And, you know, they're similar but different. And here's what I can tell you is, one, I can appreciate your frustration. Two, there's a lot of thought that goes into creating these academic styles. And the purpose is so that you know what to expect as a reader when you read something written in one of these styles. So you know that there has been a certain level of research, a certain type of research. It's been formatted, and even in the way that we use Word, if you're using Word or the equivalent in whatever other app you're using, to format the writing in a certain way. And I understand that it can be a little frustrating. At the same time, one of the reasons that you're required to take this class in your first or second year is you're going to be using this approach in other classes as you go through college. And so you need to have this fundamental background. Some of you come out of high school, or maybe you've been out of high school a long time, with a lot of these skills. But you're going to find that I think the expectations are a bit different once you get to the college level. Proper language conventions simply means grammar, spelling, punctuation, syntax, that sort of thing. And this is where writing is particularly difficult. English is a beautiful language, but it's a difficult language, and it has lots of rules, some of which are hard to follow. I encourage you to use online tools like Grammarly, which will help identify errors in spelling, language, punctuation, etc., and suggest corrections. There is no reason for anyone to submit a paper that is full of errors in spelling, punctuation, grammar, syntax, etc. We're going to talk about how to essentially, even though we're writing in an academic style, it doesn't need to be stiff and hard to follow. There is a way to essentially tell a story while staying within academic style. We're going to talk about that. That also sometimes is a real challenge for students who just want to kind of regurgitate a whole bunch of information onto the page. We want to go to the next step and take the reader from an introduction, from a thesis statement, right through to one idea after the other, flowing in somewhat natural rhythm in a way that it sort of tells a story. We'll talk about more of that in later lessons. You're going to learn early how to identify a good source from a bad source. And I talk about two levels of sources: credible, which could include a news site. In some cases, it might include, say, a nonprofit organization that focuses on a certain issue. But generally speaking, we want to focus on scholarly sources, which means they are peer-reviewed. So someone or someones have written a paper or research article and have turned it in to their peers, other members of the academic community, to review it, not for necessarily do they agree with it, but was it done in appropriate academic approach. So we're going to talk about all that, and these are the official outcomes for English 102, not just in this class. If you were taking this from another instructor, you would see something very similar in the outcomes, because in the state of Idaho, they're basically, for this class, it's very much the same across the board. I approached this with some basic expectations of what you bring to the table. And these are the three main expectations that I come to the table with as far as how you'll approach the class. First of all, I operate under the assumption that you already have a basic understanding and can apply basic rules of spelling, punctuation, grammar, all of that. Now, I understand that for a lot of students, even college students, their grasp and ability to use proper spelling, grammar, punctuation varies widely. This is why I allow you to use tools like Grammarly and other kinds of spell check and grammar check devices to assist you. English spelling, English grammar is challenging, difficult. I run Grammarly in the background anytime I write anything. I've got Grammarly running in the background to remind me. Sometimes I don't agree with Grammarly and I don't make the changes it proposes, but Oftentimes I do, and oftentimes it finds errors that I hadn't caught. So I expect you to be able to produce posts on Canvas and papers and emails to me that are written in proper grammar, spelling, punctuation, syntax, just means how words are put together to convey a message. You will make use of all of the tools that I provide to you. There is a website called Purdue OWL, which is by far the best website I've ever seen on providing students the basics on academic writing. It's spectacular. Purdue University is a highly respected private university in Indiana. Happens to be about 30 miles from where I grew up a long time ago. But I expect you to use that. I don't give you every answer specifically and tell you how to correct every error. I expect you to be able to do the majority of that. If you need to use the tutoring center, I encourage you to reach out early. They're not going to provide you all the solutions either, but they can get you past some of the basic issues, making sure that you're getting some of the basics right. You're going to watch all of my lessons, and I know that sometimes that can be a challenge, but it's the replacement for sitting in class. These are the lessons that I prepare. If I were teaching you face-to-face, these are the things I would be teaching you in a live face-to-face environment. We don't have that alternative in an online class, and so I expect you to watch those videos, which is the same as showing up for class. And you will do the math and take the necessary time you need to do all of the work that needs to be done. This is not a huge heavy lift, but if you were, let's say, in a 16-week regular semester course, this is the 3-credit course, you would be sitting in a classroom for 3 hours a week. Now, just because we're taking this class online doesn't mean that you can do it in less time. Maybe you can. Some students just can do that, but you need to anticipate that you need to spend probably 4 to 5 hours a week, depending on the week, on this class, doing the basic research and things of that sort, and working on your writing and all that. If you don't get the score you want early in the class, I recommend going back and thinking through, did you miss anything? Did you watch every video? Did you read the textbook that was assigned? Did you use the resources that are available to you? Or did you wait for me to point out the errors and make the corrections, which I do not do. I do provide very specific feedback on each final essay that you submit, but on the draft, and I have a whole lesson on how this works, I don't do it that way. So put in the necessary time. I've been teaching this class now for more than 4 years, depending on when you watch this. And I find these 4 issues are the most common among students in this class. Now, not everybody has these challenges. Some people have other challenges, but these are the 4 I see most often. The first is using academic style appropriately. I provide all the tools you need to get it right, but you need to then use those tools. MLA is slightly different than APA. There are format. In other words, where do you indent? What font size do you use? When do you use quotation marks? Where do you place the periods? How do you create a thesis statement? These are all part of learning to write in an academic style, and it may not be quite what you're used to if you're recently or even not recently out of high school, or if you're still in high school for that matter. It might be a little different. And it is enforced. I want you to come away from this class confident that you can write papers and essays in other classes using the style that you will be assigned. A lot of students struggle with basic punctuation and grammar. Even students who feel somewhat confident in the use of grammar, spelling, punctuation, etc., may not have done it in an academic format. So when you're writing creatively, you're writing fiction, that's a whole other thing, and you're allowed to kind of get away with a lot more. Not only is academic style about format, but it's about the use of words and what words to use and not use. And there, again, Purdue OWL, you can go to the APA style homepage, you can go to the MLA style homepage. If you want to get really ambitious, you can buy a handbook. If you think you're going to be using APA or MLA quite a bit going forward, buy yourself your own handbook. It's probably $20. So I don't require it because there are so many online resources, but you might want to have that with you. I have both of them sitting here on my desk, and I use them often. Even though I've been writing in these styles for a long time, I still go back and make sure that I've got it right. You're going to learn how to evaluate good research from bad, and this is often a challenge. I get a lot of students trying to use blog posts or other kinds of sources for their papers. And for example, I don't allow the use of Wikipedia as a source. Now, you might use Wikipedia to help you find legitimate sources. That's in a whole other lesson. But I still see quite a few students, even later in the semester, using research that doesn't quite rise to the level of scholarly, and that's the kind of the gold standard for research. And finally, a lot of students get stuck on the idea that if they just throw a lot of information into a series of paragraphs and the information is generally accurate and it comes from a good place, that's good enough. And what I want you to do is to start working on how do you weave a bit of a narrative? How do you tell something of a story? And I talk about that in other lessons, but that proves to be challenging for some students.